Bienvenidos al Festival Guitar Plus de Dadario Latinoamérica, primer festival online en su segunda edición de instrumentos, accesorios y cuerdas en Latinoamérica. Mi nombre es Patricio Pose, soy youtuber, guitarrista, productor e ingeniero en sonido graduado del Miami-Dade College y voy a estar presentando y traduciendo a algunos de los maestros. Si me quieren buscar, Patricio Pose o Pat Pose con doble S. Estamos muy contentos de recibirlos y contarles que si bien en esta clase no podrán encender la cámara o el micrófono, sí podrán compartir sus preguntas al maestro en el botón preguntas y respuestas que se encuentra en la pantalla de Zoom. Las mismas serán respondidas al final de la clase o cuando el maestro lo crea oportuno. Recuerden que hoy, en el horario de herramientas creativas, junto al maestro Fer Ruiz, estaremos realizando un sorteo de productos imperdibles, únicamente entre los presentes. Durante el festival habrá un sorteo sorpresa y más novedades. Encuentran toda la grilla de horarios y maestros en la página web oficial del festival, www.festivaldadario.com, en la sección Festivales. También pueden seguirnos en las redes. En Instagram estamos como dadarioanco.latam y en Facebook nos encuentran como Dadario Latinoamérica. También me acaban de avisar de que tenemos un sorteo que está siendo producido por las redes, así que sáquense una foto con la masterclass, etiquétennos y será el ganador anunciado por las historias. Ahora sí, les queremos presentar a nuestro amigo David Townsend. Devin, como ya saben, es músico, vocalista y productor, músico canadiense de metal progresivo, con influencias desde el free jazz, blues, música industrial y hasta música clásica. Es el fundador de la banda de metal extremo Strapping Young Lad. Aquí con ustedes les presento David Townsend. Hey David, how are you? Are you
I'm
there?
good. How you doing, man? Can you see me?
But I can't hear you.
Yeah, it says unable to start video. Okay, there we go. Start my video. Unable to start. Now you can see me, right?
Now we can see you. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, man. So, I guess there's a bunch of people watching this, and this is meant to be a master class based on my connection to music production and guitar. Correct?
Correct. Let me, just to remind you, I do have to translate it to Spanish, so just give me a second, I'll say.
Understood. Understood.
Nos dice, bueno, nos saluda, nos da la bienvenida y dice que, bueno, él sabe que esto era una masterclass, pero él prefiere hacer algo por ahí un poco más interactivo con nosotros, entonces vamos a también abrir las preguntas y respuestas. Así que abajo podrán hacer las preguntas en el Q&A o preguntas y respuestas como le figure abajo en Zoom. Okay, so I just opened it up so that people can ask questions and stuff like that, as you asked.
Okay.
So
I do have a list of things that I'll start with, and we'll go down the list. And I think that that'll give us, because we basically got an hour here. So why don't we start with my guitar tuning?
go for it.
Okay,
Dice que
so
lo primero que va a hacer nos va a hablar de su afinación.
basically, when I started playing guitar, of course I was in standard tuning like everybody else, but it was the. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just translating what you said. Don't worry about
Awesome. Oh, so you can do it while I'm talking?
it. For the most part, yes.
Okay, good luck. So I started in standard tuning, but I fell in love with Led Zeppelin and the album Led Zeppelin 3.
Se enamoró de bueno, empezó afinando como todos en estándar, pero se enamoró del disco Led Zeppelin 3.
And on that record, there was a song called Friends that I felt very attracted to, and I could not learn how to play the guitar, thinking that it was some mystical technique that he had, but I found out that it was a different tuning that he's in.
Dice que estaba muy atraído por una canción que se llama Friends en ese álbum y que él buscaba la manera de tocarlo y no podía hacerlo, entonces pensaba que era algo místico, algo mágico que hacían, hasta que se dio cuenta de que era la afinación, era una distinta afinación.
And what I found out was the tuning from low to high is C, G, C, G, C, E, a C major chord.
Y dice que la afinación que él descubrió que era do, sol, y mi, o sea, un do mayor, abierto.
And since that time, I was probably 12 years old, and I'm 50 now. I have been in that tuning, and I'll start to show you how it functions here now.
Dice que desde entonces, a los 12 años, se enamoró de esa afinación y ahora que con 50 años sigue afinando de la misma manera. Así que ahora nos va a demostrar cómo suena esa afinación en sus manos.
So
Awesome.
when I first started in this tuning, because I also am a singer, the thing that I found most fantastic about it immediately is that it's immediately music. It's immediately a chord when you play.
Sí, lo que más le gustó es que aparte de como él es cantante, la afinación esa inmediatamente es musical, inmediatamente ya suena como un acorde.
And the benefit of that is even children, when they're playing, wherever you put your finger, it's just a bar chord. And it's a major chord wherever you are, right?
El beneficio de eso es que, aunque sean niños los que estén tocando, con solamente apretar con un dedo todas las cuerdas, se forma un acorde. Entonces lo moves para un lado, para el otro y listo.
And because I'm a singer, it makes it much easier when I'm playing live if all I have to do is like this, single finger chords.
Como es cantante, se le hace mucho más fácil para hacerlo en vivo, ya que solamente tiene que pensar en apretar todas las cuerdas a la vez.
So when I began experimenting with guitar, the difference between what I do and what my friends were doing at the time is that I like to use the guitar to create a mood. So the whole function for me is less about songs, less about technique, but it's about how to describe a frame of mind.
Dice que lo que lo separa a él de sus amigos en esa época, inclusive, cuando era joven, es que el hecho de que él no se preocupa por la técnica, ni se preocupa tal vez por la música en sí, sino por crear una especie, una sensación y poder traducir lo que él siente o lo que piensa con la música. So, I got a couple of questions actually, because it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Digo que tengo varias preguntas acá, aparte del Q&A que ustedes tienen, hay muchas preguntas que salen por el hecho de que es muy distinto cómo él compone y demás. So, well, first of all, when you first got started, it must have been really hard to actually get playing, because everybody, even I, when we first start playing guitar, you start like mimicking somebody else, but you're very constricted to whatever it is that you could play if you only have an open C chord. So how was that in the beginning?
Well, I have 30 albums of my own material, and perhaps part of that is to do with the fact that there's no one really to play with if you're in open C. But for me, it was fantastic. I don't know any cover songs. I just know my own material.
Perfect, that's great. La pregunta que le hacía es que, como él afina en do abierto, le decía, bueno, uno cuando está aprendiendo a tocar, cuando está haciendo sus primeros pasos, generalmente tiende a seguir o a copiar otros guitarristas. En mi caso, Brian May, en caso de mucha gente, bueno, distintos guitarristas. Entonces, al él afinar totalmente distinto, ya desde tan joven, no tuvo la oportunidad de por ahí empezar a copiar a otros músicos. Entonces le decía qué tan difícil era aprender, dar esos primeros pasos. Y me dice de que, bueno, por eso es que tiene 30 álbumes grabados, porque tiene tanto material y tanto tiempo tocando, que no se sabe ninguna canción, no puede hacer el cover de ninguna banda, porque solamente sabe tocar sus propios temas.
So, if I may, I just had another thing to add to that.
Mhm.
In the idea of making music that acts as a mood, I was raised in Vancouver, and as a result of that, so much of my connection to mood comes from nature and from weather. So ever since I was first starting guitar, I had the idea of making my guitar sound like it was part of a rainstorm.
Dice de que, bueno, también para agregar, él siempre lo que quiso hacer es mostrar un sentimiento, una atmósfera. Él, habiendo sido de Vancouver, una parte de Canadá, donde hace mucho frío y demás, él siempre tuvo una conexión muy importante con la naturaleza. Entonces él siempre quiso expresar eso y siempre hizo que su guitarra en su cabeza suene como la naturaleza, como lluvia, por ejemplo. So, would you say that it's probably like close to the state of mind of like the black metal from Norway, like where they have like that very dark and gloomy atmosphere and mood?
It's more gray than black.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Me preguntaba si él siente alguna conexión con, por ejemplo, bandas de Noruega que también tienen esa conexión con la naturaleza y con bueno, el black metal y demás, con el frío y la naturaleza. Y él me dice que sería un poco más gris que tan negro.
So two things. The first thing is that I've used echo and reverb as it's not an effect to me. It's my sound. It's
Como son-
sometimes people hear it and think, "Oh, there's too much echo," and I
Ujú.
think, "Yeah, but that's my sound." You know, I'm
Por
trying to
eso-
make it sound like that.
También por eso es que él usa tanto delay y tanto reverb, porque justamente le da esa sensación de espacio, de atmósfera que él necesita y que él quiere. Muchas veces dice que la gente comenta que es mucho, que es demasiado, pero dice, ese es mi sonido, así suena mi guitarra.
And the other thing I was going to mention about it was the idea of symmetry is really important to me. So even with this tuning, so if you can hear, 2 seconds. So is this it?
Está probando para darnos un ejemplo con la guitarra.
So if you hear, it's C, G,
Mira,
C,
do, do,
G,
sol.
C, E. So it's a very basic. It's just fifths. Open, octave, 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 and then the E string is just kind of like, you know,
Serían
makes.
dos, por la tercera, que es mi, que es la cuerda más fina.
But the idea behind that and what makes it so fantastic for playing is that this string, and this string are they're the same thing. So, and then these two in between, the G's, are also same thing. So you can essentially do really lyrical things from the beginning. So like a major scale is just, and then a minor is just, it's the same. And there's that symmetry.
La afinación, porque todas las cuerdas, digamos la primera, la tercera,
So
porque la segunda están afinadas igual, la quinta y la tercera están afinadas iguales entre sí, y la primera es la única que está distinta. Entonces se consiguen hacer muchas cosas muy melódicas, muy vocales con esa afinación.
and with that comes the idea of arpeggios as well. So for an arpeggio, these three strings are the same, and these two strings are the same, exactly the same, except for it's or. So it's the same on these three strings, same on these two strings.
Son iguales las primeras tres cuerdas, las tres dos y las dos sol también son iguales entre sí.
And then because of it always having this sort of open pedal tone in C, it allows you to sort of play with the open strings.
Podemos abrir las cuerdas y tocar con la cuerda abierta muy fácilmente. So that raises a lot of questions, actually. I'm looking at the Q&A section and it's just blowing up. A lot of questions are about your the gauges of strings that you use. Entonces le digo que, bueno, ustedes están haciendo muchas preguntas al respecto y está buenísimo. Una de ellas es el tipo de cuerda que usa y el grosor, el calibre de la cuerda.
So the gauge of strings that I use now, this is interesting in a sense to me because it's 10 through 52, and it's been the Dario XL since I was born.
Que toca 52 y que siempre tocó Dadario XL desde que nació.
But
¿Sí?
sometimes my guitar, 75% of my guitars are open C. The other ones are open B, which is exactly the same thing, but a half step down. So B, F sharp, B, F sharp, B, D sharp, right?
Ujú.
But, and I have a couple guitars in standard, just, because, but
Tiene alguna guitarra estándar.
all of them are 10 through 52. So even
Todas
though, yeah, even though the tension on a B strung guitar is much slinkier, and a C is a little tighter, and a standard is very tight because of the 10 through 52, I use the same gauge no matter what the tuning.
Dice que, bueno, a pesar de que, por ejemplo, en Si, cuando afinan en Si, las cuerdas están mucho más sueltas, o en Do están un poquito más ajustadas, o en estándar están bastante más ajustadas, él usa siempre las mismas cuerdas en todas. se acostumbró a eso. That's very interesting, actually.
But it's also it creates an identity for each tuning. So when I'm playing in C, it always feels a certain way. When I play in B, it feels looser. And when I play in standard, it feels tighter. And I've come to know that standard is supposed to feel like that, C is supposed to feel like that, and B is supposed to feel like that, all 10 through 52.
Dice que con eso también logró de que cada afinación tenga su propia identidad, porque cada afinación se le sienta de distinta manera a la mano. En sí le sienta un poco más blando, en do le sienta un poquito más ajustada, y en mi, por supuesto, la siente como una guitarra normal. Entonces, para él, siempre la guitarra afinada en mi se siente de esta forma, la que está afinada en do se siente de otra forma, y la que está afinada en B o en si de otra forma. Siempre de eso.
What's also super important to me, like I say before, is the effects that I use, because I play with the echo. It's part of the style, and by that I mean it's not just echo. It's like if I'm playing a note, I can hear how that interacts with. So go ahead.
Él usa el delay para pasar de nota a nota, no es solamente un eco, él lo usa como un pasaje musical.
And so much of the style involves the open strings as well. So a lot of it is just the pull-offs, right?
Mucho de eso es él haciendo hammer-ons y pull-offs, o sea, alargando y apretando la cuerda.
But the idea is, so equipment is very important to me. I work with several guitar companies. This is a new guitar company I'm working with because we're making a guitar for just one type of music for me. This ambient type of music is what I use this guitar for. If you want to...
Ese equipamiento es muy importante para él, que esta guitarra, por ejemplo, es una guitarra de una marca nueva con la que empezó a trabajar para hacer solamente un tipo de música, que es música ambiental.
And
y ahora
the other one. So I've been working with Framus for many years.
Estuve trabajando con Framus muchos años.
And this guitar is made for metal.
La guitarra está hecha para metal.
So, but it's open C, just like what we were talking about, exactly the same thing, but the way that the tuning works for metal, it's one thing to do sort of like the sort of fancy lyrical things, but for metal, it's basically just one finger, octaves. So like the one finger chord is a fifth, right? The octaves, you miss a string. Those are the two. And then suspended, which is just...
Super cool.
Okay, so with that in mind, there's a couple things gear-wise that became very important to me, and I have different guitars for different things.
Mucho de su sonido tiene que ver con su equipamiento, entonces tiene distintas guitarras para distintas cosas.
So, in this tuning, for the heavy stuff, I always use the Evertune bridge because I haven't tuned this guitar in months, months.
De metal le gusta siempre usar este tipo de guitarra con el puente Evertune. ¿Por qué? Porque hace meses que no la afina.
Months. So I just took it out of the case today. And you can right? And the reason why that's important to me is in the studio, I want not a lot of options. I want only a few options. I want to be able to take a guitar and immediately record and be able to keep it.
Y poder directamente grabar y ya poder dejar esa grabación.
with that as well, I design pickups with Fishman, the Fishman Transcendence pickups, but they're made exactly for what I do.
Que sirven para exactamente lo que él hace.
Now with the new guitars that we're working on, like the Kiso ones, it's for making ambient sounds, making ambient music, and the idea is to create
Es poder crear
a very easy way for me to efficiently create a mood, right? So I'll explain here in another way.
eficientemente.
So with this other guitar,
Esta otra guitarra,
the idea with the same tuning is, although it's one thing to do the heavy metal vibe with the other guitar.
heavy metal y otra cosa sea hacer sonidos ambientales.
This But if you see the process of making this, it's all these similar patterns. It's just like these sort of legato steps,
Los pasos ligados.
So the idea for making music, and going back to one of your first things that you say, like must have been difficult to not be able to jam with people.
Idea de hacer música, y volviendo a lo que yo le he preguntado, de que había sido difícil en su comienzo no poder tocar con demás gente.
I created a technique, and it's not just the guitar, it's the studio, it's the gear, it's the simplicity of it, so that I can basically record ideas as fast as I can
Grabar ideas.
work.
Got a lot of questions about the other 50%, because we've talked about your guitars and the tuning and of course the strings,
Yeah.
which the audio.
Yeah.
But what about the sound, like your effects and amplifiers, whatever it is that you use in the studio, in the box? Are you in the box as far as the computer goes, or do you use?
Yeah.
Le preguntamos acerca de, el otro 50% de su sonido. Ya hablamos de sus guitarras, hablamos de las cuerdas que son D'Addario, como él dijo, y hablamos de su afinación, pero le pregunto qué tipo de efectos usa, si es que lo usa directamente en la computadora o usa amplificadores y pedales analógicos.
So it's all digital. For years I used Mesa Boogie dual rectifier with a Maxon tube screamer to kind of saturate it, And I had the PV 5150 and tried a couple other things, but I love digital, man. And it's funny when people say, "What is your favorite amplifier?" You're allowed to say a Dumble, for example. You can say that, but you're not allowed to say my favorite amplifier is a Fractal.
Fractal. I wonder. Digital's it's come a long way. I remember
I love it.
With an RP. I don't know if you remember those Digitech RP50s, RP100s.
I used to have them. I mean, the thing is, now we.
Te comento de que, digitalmente los años, y que hemos logrado demasiado desde, por ejemplo, un Digitech RP100 a lo que tenemos hoy.
But all my sounds, I've been working with Neural DSP, and we're releasing a plugin next spring. But my favorite amplifier is Fractal Axe-Fx. I use it on my screen. I have the editor all the time.
En primavera van a hacer un plugin con Neural DSP, pero su amplificador favorito sigue siendo el Fractal.
I have one cable that goes to everything. So, I mean, I do have the Line 6 Helix, which I love too, the Neural stuff, the fractal, the older fractal, but one cable for bass, guitar, acoustic, everything. It's all straight in. But then I've got my bass sounds, my acoustic sounds, my lead sounds, my clean sounds, heavy sounds. And the sounds that I've created are almost exclusively dedicated to the song.
Exclusivamente dedicado para cada canción. Wow, so you must have like a huge bank, a huge library of sounds.
Nah, I've got a lot of sounds, but I don't like. I can basically make it a clean,
Pero básicamente,
heavy, a grit,
you know,
a synth, a
sucio,
bass,
¿no?
and then the effects change. So probably about 10, I'd say, about 10 sounds.
10 sonidos aproximadamente.
Again, I don't like options. I don't want 300 sounds, I don't want 300 delays. I want one good delay, right?
Quiero uno solo. Well, actually, that would make a case for I'm actually on the opposite side of you right now. With this last sentence you just said. I mean, I agree with everything else you said, and it's not necessarily that I disagree with what you just said, but I do also advocate the fact that I like lesser options. So I would prefer to have like one guitar pedal as opposed to having a huge library of sounds.
That's exactly it. We agree then. I think we may be mistaken because I agree with that. That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
You're just doing it digitally and I'm doing it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yo le digo que, bueno, que en mi experiencia tener por ahí un pedal analógico es mejor por el hecho de que tenés un solo sonido, entonces te restringe y es una sola cosa. Él hace lo mismo, pero digitalmente.
I do make my own cabinet impulses, though. That's one of the things, because I felt that in the beginning, the problem that I was having with heavy sounds were the cabinets. So I make my own impulses.
Dice que sí graba sus IR o impulse response de sus propias cajas, porque dice que el problema que él tenía con los sonidos heavy, más que nada, era el sonido de las cajas o el sonido que emulaban el emulador, digamos, del amplificador en sí, de la caja o baffle.
And then because of that, once I finished recording a record, when I go on tour, I can just have all the same sounds, all the same effects. I can have the auto switching happening. The only difference between studio and tour with digital for me is it's much better for the sound person to have one cabinet impulse for all your sounds. Yeah. Like same one for clean, same one for heavy, right?
Lo mejor que tiene también es que el hecho de que, bueno, cuando él sale en tour, en gira, él solamente tiene que apretar un botón y tiene todo su sonido guardado, ya sea para limpio, para distorsiones, y también ayuda al sonidista el hecho de que tiene todo ya preparado. No tiene que estar microfoneando, ni tiene que estar preocupándose por bajar o subir la distorsión, o los graves, o los medios. Directamente tiene todo ya listo.
And I also find that now, after doing digital since the Roland GP100, so 1992 is when I started with digital. Now, the sounds that I have, that I rely on, I can't get from amplifiers.
You come to rely on it. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome because it's clean too, It's like I love the fact that I don't have lots of cables, I don't have lots of bullshit. It's like clean. I can focus on writing and playing and not chasing tone because I know what I want, and to get the sound that I have now, it's like 4 parallel paths, 2 of which are effects, 1 of which is a synth. There's 3 drive pedals. To do that with an amplifier, I'd have racks and racks and racks, and I just...
Racks and racks and racks.
I don't want it.
That's totally understandable.
Yeah, and it's a preference, right? Like some people, and I love amplifiers. I have old Fender amp that I think is beautiful, and a Marshall and a Fender, and they're great. But my preference is digital, right? And that's it. It's just a preference. I'm not right or wrong. It's just a preference.
Es solo mi preferencia. No estoy ni bien ni mal. No es correcto o no. Es solo mi preferencia. Which makes it right for you. So the question is, though, it's just, I mean, other than the simplicity of it. It's just a matter of just being able to record and get it out of the way.
Yeah, and I just
Sí, es solo la simplicidad.
I
Es poder
I'm
grabar, tocar y
I got a
terminar.
buddy. I got a buddy who's super romantic about gear. Like he loves it. Like he'll open the case and he's like, "You smell that case? This is from 1974 and you can smell the beer and the sweat and this amplifier was made by, virgins in Manila or something." And it's like, you know what I mean? There's all this and I'm just like, for me,
Para mí,
I mean, it's cool, but it's not
bueno,
I don't care, right?
no importa.
So, I think if you care about that, which is great. I mean, people care about so many things, right? And if you care about it, then that's what you should do. But if
Yeah.
you don't care about it, it's a pain in the ass. It's like, wow, yeah, it smells like beer and it's 700 pounds. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean?
Tírame una cerveza y peso un montón, no me importa.
You gotta figure out, and I have on my list here. One of the main things is I get asked for my advice for young musicians.
I was going to ask you that,
I
actually.
get asked all the time, and I have two answers. One is you have to figure out
Mi consejo para
who
los
you
jóvenes.
are
Primero es
and what you like and what you don't like,
quién sos y qué te gusta y qué es lo que no te gusta.
and accept that that also changes over time.
Que
But
eso también puede cambiar con el tiempo.
it's funny because, for example, digital versus analog.
Por ejemplo, digital contra análogo.
I know that I know what my preference is, but oftentimes you'll talk to people and they will try to convince you that your opinion for you
Tu
is
opinión
not correct.
está mal.
They're like, you're wrong about what you like. And what I would suggest to musicians, young musicians, is even if somebody tells you you're wrong about what you like, you have to be strong in the mind to know that it's like,
Vos tenés que ser fuerte y saber que
it's up to you, man. It's like, do what you want. And the other thing, when people talk about advice to young musicians, learning how to accept when things don't go well, learning how to fail. I say this all the time.
aprender a fallar.
I've got a buddy, a musician.
Un
He
amigo mío,
worked. He worked for years on his first album.
en su primer álbum,
Put it out, and people didn't like it.
sacó por
Right.
fin, gente no le gustó. It can happen.
And bad reviews. People tell go online, you go onto a YouTube thing, and it's like, not only is this record suck, but his mother's a bitch or whatever, right? Like, it's like,
El álbum es muy malo, sino que su madre es una perra.
it's like, and this guy's worked and spent all this money and it didn't work.
Gastó su
Or,
dinero y funcionó.
or let's go for myself, for example. I had a festival that I had to play that I was told the whole time, if you play a great show at this festival, it'll take your career to the next level.
Festival, tu carrera va a explotar.
And I went on stage and ate shit for an hour.
Y me subí al escenario y comí mierda una hora.
It was awful. Worst show ever. And I came off stage, and the same people that before the show were patting me on the back and telling me that I was going to be a star were nowhere to be found because it was awful.
Fue buenísimo el show, no la podía encontrar, se habían ido todos porque fue horrible.
The biggest piece of advice I can give to young musicians is the people who have a career know how to get back up after those scenarios because that is part of it. Failure is a huge part of it.
Es una carrera en la música, es la gente que sabe levantarse después de un golpe, porque es parte de esto, es parte del camino.
I remember hearing a quote, successful people have failed more times than unsuccessful people have tried.
Que decía, la frase decía que las personas que lo logran son las personas que se equivocaron o fallaron más veces que las personas que no lo logran e incluso intentaron hacer.
So do not ever read YouTube comments.
No lean los comentarios en YouTube. I hope the comments on this video are good.
Yeah, man.
I'm reading them just in case, though.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So I think that the next thing I'd like to talk about, if it's okay,
A ver, dice que bueno, la próxima cosa que le gustaría hablar
is dealing with writer's block.
es, that's really good. Es acerca de cuando los músicos pierden la inspiración.
So, all of us here, all of us
Todos nosotros.
who are musicians,
Los músicos,
have those moments where songs just happen and you're like,
las canciones solamente pasan, ocurren.
that's so great. I love it. What a great riff. It's just, I love this.
Me encanta.
But then maybe
Pero
you
después,
finish a record or a show or a project and you're
perfecto.
very happy with it. And if you're fortunate, other people like it too.
Otra gente también le gusta.
Now, the problem is after that,
Bueno,
sometimes for 6 months, 2 months, 1 year, 2 years, there's nothing.
Desalinado.
And everybody, I guarantee you, everybody who's an artist, that's
Todo
part of it.
le ha pasado, le ha pasado. Es parte de eso.
Because we're often insecure, it's easy to assume that because there's nothing, there will never be anything after. It's gone.
No va a haber más nada. Y se fue.
So my advice,
Así que mi
and this
consejo,
is almost the most important thing that I think I could say during this presentation,
puedo decir en esta presentación,
during those times when there's no music, you have no inspiration,
o sea, no hay música,
get your cables organized.
organiza,
Your system functioning properly. Make sure that one plugin in Logic or Pro Tools or Ableton, whatever you're using, there's maybe one plugin that's a problem. It's like, or, in my situation, I know that, for example, I go through when I'm making music, almost every track in my session has a high pass and a low pass EQ. Like
cada,
everyone.
cada pista de cualquier cosa que yo grabo tiene un corte en los graves y un corte en los agudos. Todas.
But when I'm in the zone, when I'm really writing,
Estoy,
I can't think about making presets. It just doesn't work. I don't think about, I can't take the 2 minutes to organize a cable. I don't do those things when I'm focusing, because when I'm focusing,
estoy enfocado. Estoy enfocado.
all my energy needs to go there.
Todo mi energía tiene que ir a eso.
So when you don't have any inspiration, when there's no songs, when there's no music, when there's no art, make your presets that you know you're going to use. Organize that cable that's pissing you off. Make sure the intonation on that one guitar that's been off for a year, take an afternoon, sit in front of the TV, intonate your guitar. You know what I mean? Get all these things done. So over the past while, it's like making sure, like I put labels on each one of my keys here because I'm not a piano player. So when I go and I know it's in C, the whole time I was recording the last record, I was thinking, where the fuck is it? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But so when I didn't have any music, I put C, D, E, F, and then blue dots on the octaves and everything, so that when I do get inspiration again, those things that were bothering me, I'm like, oh,
Eso que me molestaban, ya no tengo que perder tiempo.
I can't recommend it enough. 2 things. One, the inspiration will come back. Who knows when, but it will. Don't worry.
No sabemos cuándo, pero va a volver.
And then 2, in those moments when you aren't inspired, take that time to make all the things that have been bothering you not a problem anymore. It'll change your world.
That's great. That's a great advice. Te digo que es un muy buen consejo. So Devin, we've got about 15 minutes left, so we can just do a quick Q&A with
Sure.
short answers to the questions we have, because we've got a ton of questions.
Great.
We actually have about 64 questions that haven't been answered yet.
Okay.
Well, we're not going to get through all of them, but I'm just going to browse through and hopefully the better ones.
Yeah, man.
So one of the guys has actually asked about, how you like digital and stuff, but how is that compared to your signature pedals that you have? Le pregunto, bueno, le dije de que tenemos 15 minutos para cerrar la sesión, entonces que le vamos a hacer preguntas y respuestas rápidas de la caja de preguntas y respuestas. La primera pregunta es que, bueno, de Alfonso Reyes, que dice, entiendo lo de lo digital, pero entonces, ¿qué onda con los pedales Signature?
Every product that I've made with any company is because it's something that I wanted to make.
Cualquier
You
producto
know,
que cualquier compañía es porque él quería hacer ese producto. Ujú.
I I get asked a lot to put my name on something, like
Piden
a
mucho
an overdrive pedal,
pedal de
right?
distorsión. Ujú.
But I don't. There's nothing that I could add to an overdrive pedal that I don't already have. So I don't, other than making a bit of money,
Más que hacer un poco de plata.
you are not. It's not an idea that I'm like, oh yeah, I've always wanted an overdrive pedal with, I don't know, something that inflates balloons. I don't know. Whatever your idea is, unless I've got an idea for it, like I
Esto
don't want to make it. So the
lo-
pedals that I've made, anything that I've made, are because I have an idea that I think would be super cool.
Así que cada cosa que hice fue porque tenía una idea que yo pensaba que era muy buena, que era algo distinto.
For example, I made this like maybe, gosh, almost 10 years ago. I worked on this Ocean Machine pedal with Moore in China, but they were the only ones that could do certain things that I thought were super cool that other people didn't do. For example,
Por ejemplo,
there's a delay, there's two delays and a reverb and a looper
un grupo.
that while the delays are going, I wanted to be able to change the type of delay. So if it's going ding, 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 you can change it in real time and go ding, 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 blah, 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 and you can really, and then you can also real time take that delay, move the order that it's in while the
Digamos,
delays keep going, and you can create soundscapes on this thing that solved a problem for me that up to that point I used three pedals for.
así que podías, con ese único pedal, podías
The
arreglar un problema que tenía para el cual necesitaba en otro momento tres pedales por lo menos.
the famous this Stormbender guitar that I've been using for years,
Esta guitarra que está acá, que la vengo usando hace años,
I designed it so it has the same construction as a Les Paul custom with a set neck,
sea
but it
como
feels like a neck through, and it's
punta
the
difícil.
reasons it's the way that it is because it solved problems. So anything that I've made, I
Sí.
only make something if I want to make it, right?
Realmente hago cosas porque quiero hacerlas, no por necesidad.
Yeah, there's my answer.
That's a great answer. Te digo que es una buena respuesta. Another question actually is something we haven't talked about at all. Is the fact that you're also a singer, and a great one at that. Te digo que otra cosa de la que no hemos hablado todavía es del hecho de que es cantante y que es un gran cantante. What was your approach, like musically, to that? Did you have any training at all? ¿Cómo abordó el tema de la voz, de cantar? Si tuvo algún tipo de entrenamiento o estudió.
I'm a singer because the singers that I tried out when I was a kid to be in my band were assholes.
Cantante porque todos los cantantes que probé eran malas personas.
So I learned how to sing thinking that I was not going to continue. I would just do it until I found a singer.
Iba a cantar pensando que no iba a cantar, solamente lo hacía hasta que encuentre un cantante.
I had a great choir teacher in school and band teachers, but I didn't take any lessons. I worked at restaurants and I was I washed dishes. Like that's what my job was because I was, I was too funny looking to give people food. So what I would do is while I was washing dishes, I would sing along to music.
Me ponía a cantar porque como era mi aspecto era muy gracioso, muy raro para la comida a la gente, me ponía a cantar mientras lavaba y ese fue mi entrenamiento.
Yeah. And then Steve Vai asked me to sing, and now I'm a singer. So
Un cantante. He did you a favor, I mean.
He did. So did my first singers who were assholes.
Actually, yes, in retrospect.
Yeah, man.
Creo que, bueno, Steve Vai le hizo un gran favor al hacerlo cantar. Y me dice que, bueno, él y también todos los cantantes que eran tan mala persona que lo empezaron a tener que cantar él. Another question I have here is that, otra pregunta que tenemos, as far as like, you have your songs, obviously, you have your song structures, but once you get to the solos, how much of the solo is actually improvised and how much of the solo is actually written beforehand? Una pregunta de Lucas que dice, bueno, en la parte de los solos de las canciones, ¿cuánto de lo que está, en vivo es improvisado y cuánto está compuesto? I think the question actually just refers to it live, like how much of that is actually improvised live and how much of that is actually written beforehand.
Maybe half and half. I think that the way that I record solos in the studio is I improvise totally, and then when I listen back, if something I don't like happens, I punch in and improvise more, and then I punch in and you know.
Si hay algo que no le gusta, entonces eso lo borra y graba otra cosa improvisada arriba. So you don't actually like sit there and like figure out melodies or anything like that beforehand.
No, only if it's a melodic part, which I view differently than a solo. Yeah, of course, right? But when it's an actual solo, I just kind of just play.
Y es un solo nada más, toca lo que él siente que la canción le pide.
I like the surprise. I like not expecting it. You know, I like when I come up with things that I'm like, oh shit, I didn't think that was going to happen. That's great.
Y dice que muchas veces dice, bueno, no pensé que iba a salir eso, pero está buenísimo. That's awesome. Another question here for you. The echo on your sound, is it a reverb and a synth? Is it both? Is there a delay on it as well? We touched on this. I mean, we did talk about it, but I think he's referring to that example you gave.
So, that's,
si es reverb, si es un sintetizador, si es delay, si es todos juntos cuando le estaba tocando.
That's one I've just been writing. I've just been working on that one this week. It's new. Everything is different, and it depends on the guitar. Like I make patches for the guitar, but typically it's an amplifier or a delay into the amplifier, delay before the amplifier, right?
Okay, so entonces el delay de la guitarra al delay al amplificador.
Yeah, maybe about 500 milliseconds, 70% repeat.
Normalmente 500 milisegundos al 50% de repeticiones.
Then after the amplifier, after the cab, I do another delay.
Otro delay.
That's, 700 milliseconds.
700 milisegundos aproximadamente.
And a dark delay so that the top end doesn't go ting 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 ting.
Y un delay bastante oscuro para que la parte aguda no se repita.
Right. I thought you were going to say ting 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 ting, but yeah. And then I go into a reverb that's maybe 10 seconds, 8 seconds.
Un reverb de aproximadamente 8 segundos. What about the synth?
Oh, that's a separate line.
En una línea distinta, digamos, en otro camino, tiene el synth.
And then I go into a ping pong delay.
Y ahí va un ping pong delay.
Yeah.
Izquierda a derecha.
And the wah acts as a auto engage and more of a filter than a wah, really.
El wah lo usa como un filtro más que como un wah. So you have it set like just cocked, basically.
No, but I don't go wah wah wah. I just kind of like while I'm playing, I'll move where the frequency kind of latches, because sometimes you can hit a harmonic or something with the wah. Like if you're holding a note, when it's cocked in a certain position, it will bring out a certain frequency, and then that feeds the echo, right?
Entonces buscas con el pie, cuando ya está prendido el wah, busca cierta frecuencia que va a hacer que haga el sonido que él busca. Normalmente busca cierto acople.
Yeah, and then the synth, I experiment with that sometimes, but it doesn't work all the time. But I like having an octave, whether or not it's a synth or a pitch shifter, I like having an octave above that has a slight delay, like maybe.
Estaba arriba con un pequeño delay.
Yeah, maybe 100 milliseconds or something.
100 milisegundos o algo así, bien cortito. Last question for you. Actually, I have 2 more questions for you.
Sure.
The second to last is going to be, Who are your inspirations? Le voy a hacer dos preguntas más para ya dejarlo ahí. ¿Cuál es su fuente de inspiración principalmente? Buena pregunta. A lot of people like tell you with like, Zappa or even Fripp, great guitar players that basically do their own thing. They march to the beat of their own drum. Would you consider yourself one of those guys? Definitely. But I mean,
Yeah, man.
were you inspired by that? Te digo de que mucha gente lo compara por ahí con Frank Zappa o con Robert Fripp, que son guitarristas que hacen más que nada su propio método y sus propias cosas, como que no son de copiar tanto a los demás. Pero si yo se considera uno de ellos, y por supuesto que sí, porque bueno, ya con el hecho de que la afinación es totalmente distinta, va a ser distinta. Pero
My
le pregunto
favorite guitar players when I was a kid were
sus favoritos cuando él era chico.
it's KK Downing from Judas Priest.
Nice.
Yeah, he was my favorite, man, because it was like lots of echo. He was out of tune, like on purpose, but it sounded so evil, right? I just loved it, man. And it's like, I loved what he did. He was probably my biggest influence.
Influencia más grande.
But also there was two others that really influenced me. Steve Morse, because it was so much of it was major, and
A las mayores.
and this guy from a band in the UK called they're a grindcore band, and they were called Old Lady Drivers, and the guy's name was James Plotkin, and he really inspired me when it came to ambient and looping.
Él me inspiró mucho con el tema del ambiente y de las repeticiones. Wow, so how do you feel about KK not being in Judas Priest now?
Well, I know Andy really well, and we're friends, and I think it's fucking amazing that he's in Judas Priest. But
le pregunto por el hecho de que KK Downing no está más en Judas Priest, cómo se siente al respecto. Dice que son amigos, pero eran distintos.
Is it disrespectful to say that I don't care?
No, it's not at all. Dice que no.
Because it's like they're just trying to make a living, right? Like, do what you got to do. I feel that when I go to listen to KK Downing, I listen to stuff from the mid '70s and the Sinner solo from the Screamer for Vengeance tour, the one where they did in Atlanta, like that one. It's like it was such a big deal to me when I was a kid, man. I remember thinking, and Unleashed in the East as well, that album. I remember whenever he did a solo, I remember thinking, how does he do that? Like, how did that feedback come out at that note? That seems like, how would he have done that? So a lot of what I've done with my sound is try to make.
Mucho de lo que hace es tratar de hacer que suene como.
I think you hear things in other people's music that you try to. It might not even be that music that was inspiring, but it's what it made you think that you try and chase. So even with what I do with the wah and all this stuff, it's about when I was a kid, I remember thinking that note, that feedback note was so unpredictable. Like, how did he do that? And probably how he did it, it was a fluke. He's standing in a place and it just fed back, right?
Particular que acopló en un disco en vivo, que lo hizo pensar tanto en esa nota que dice, ¿cómo es que la logró? Y al final estaba cerca del amplificador y por eso es que acopló, no es que él lo haya premeditado, pero fue.
But now I try to create my patches so I can do those things that I thought I heard.
Ahora, que haga lo que yo creía que estaba haciendo él.
It was also Matthias Jabs from Scorpions, like Worldwide Live, that album, he had a solo, which, maybe it doesn't hold up as well now compared to some of the other YouTube like guitar players, but it was so much reverb, it was so much echo that it sounded like he was playing to 7 million people, and I just loved the scale. It just seemed like making mountains out of sound, right? And I love that.
Sonaba como haciendo montañas con ese sonido. Okay, so the last question. What's next?
I have many things that are asking me to pay attention to them creatively. But I also feel that, like, I had to build this studio, and I'm still trying to finish it. And it's like finding ground loops getting everything wired properly. It's like I go to do something, it doesn't work properly. You know, like once that's done, probably another month,
Un mes por lo menos cuando ya termine.
I think that it's either going to be it's going to be one of five things,
Una de cinco cosas.
and I love it all. I'm so man, I fucking love music, man. I think it's so great, and I love being able to like
Me encanta
you know
poder.
I try to make my space where I work
Sí,
like a Japanese restaurant, something that's like super calm, super chill. Like I've only got a couple of pieces of gear. I've
par de
got a few
cosas.
guitars here, but they're not props, you know, like that one's in B, that one's in standard, that one's got single coils, that one's a seven string, that's a lead one, that's one with humbuckers in C, that's P bass, humbuckers in B. You know what I mean? So it's like everything that's here is it serves a real practical purpose. So when I want to do that, I go for that. When I want to do that, I go for that. Here's the patch. Here's the thing. One cable, all the instruments, all the drums. Really simple way to mix. You know what I mean? Like keep it simple, and then I can move fast.
Awesome. That's great. Well, Devin, it's been a pleasure, really. Thank you very much for sticking around and giving us a masterclass. Basically, it's Q&A, but it was definitely a masterclass. It was
Awesome, man.
so. I'm just gonna have to let you go because we do have another lesson coming up. But
Go for
thank
it.
you very much for everything.
Thank you
Eh,
so much.
Fue un placer entrevistarlo, que fue, a pesar de que hayan sido preguntas y respuestas, fue una masterclass. Así que, bueno, nada, agradecerle y decirle que, bueno, lamentablemente tenemos más gente con la que tenemos que charlar, porque si no nos quedaríamos charlando mucho tiempo con él. Pero bueno, quédense ustedes también con la siguiente clase tenemos a Fer Ruiz Díaz, que es de Catupé Cumachu y la va a romper toda seguramente. Así que bueno, muchas gracias, Devin.